In a landmark ruling, a federal judge took a bold step in defending the principles of American democracy by issuing a nationwide injunction that blocked the Trump administration from freezing federal funding without first obtaining approval from Congress. The ruling, which was issued on Thursday, delivered a sharp rebuke to the White House's actions, emphasizing the importance of upholding the separation of powers and ensuring that the executive branch does not overstep its constitutional bounds. This decision marks the culmination of a legal battle that began earlier in January, when U.S. District Judge John McConnell issued a temporary order to stop the Trump administration from carrying out its directive to freeze billions of dollars in federal funds. The injunction issued Thursday effectively cemented the decision, blocking the White House from reinstating the freeze under any form or name. This ruling is of particular significance, as it upholds the foundational principles of American government and affirms the limits of executive power. Background of the case centers on a directive issued by the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, under the Trump administration, which froze billions of dollars in federal funds. The freeze affected a variety of government programs, including essential funding for disaster relief and other crucial services. The decision to freeze these funds was met with outrage and concern from multiple quarters, including lawmakers, state governments, and legal experts, who argued that such a move was a direct violation of the U.S. Constitution and the legislative process. The OMB's directive was perceived as an attempt to circumvent Congress's role in determining the allocation of federal funds. By freezing the funds without congressional approval, the Trump administration was accused of undermining the core principles of checks and balances that are enshrined in the Constitution. Under the U.S. system of government, Congress holds the power of the purse, meaning that only the legislative branch can authorize the allocation and disbursement of federal funds. In response to this action, a group of 22 state attorneys general filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration, claiming that the freeze was unlawful, particularly in relation to federal disaster relief funds managed by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. These funds were intended to support disaster-stricken states and communities, and their sudden freeze created chaos and confusion across the country. Judge McConnell's ruling judge, John McConnell, a U.S. District Court judge appointed by President Obama, did not mince words in his ruling. He stated that the executive branch's actions were in clear violation of the separation of powers, and that the Trump administration had effectively placed itself above Congress. In his ruling, McConnell described the freeze as a fundamental affront to the balance of power established by the framers of the Constitution. The executive's categorical freeze of appropriated and obligated funds fundamentally undermines the distinct constitutional roles of each branch of our government, Judge McConnell wrote in his decision. The interaction of the three co-equal branches of government is an intricate, delicate, and sophisticated balance, but it is crucial to our form of constitutional governance. Here, the executive put itself above Congress. Judge McConnell's words echoed the core principles of American governance, principles that have been central to the country's functioning since its founding. The judge noted that while the executive branch has certain powers and discretions, it cannot exercise those powers in ways that violate the Constitution or infringe upon the authority of the legislative branch. Rather, consistent with the Constitution, statutes, and case law, the court is simply holding that the executive's discretion to impose its own policy preferences on appropriated funds can be exercised only if it is authorized by the congressionally approved appropriation statutes. McConnell continued. This statement highlighted the crucial distinction between the executive's role in administering funds and Congress's exclusive role in deciding how federal funds should be allocated, the separation of powers, and the founders' vision. In his ruling, Judge McConnell took the opportunity to offer a historical context for his decision, citing the principles that the American founders enshrined in the Constitution. The judge reflected on the lessons learned from the American Revolution, where the colonies fought against the arbitrary rule of a distant monarch. This struggle for independence led the founders to create a system of government designed to prevent any one branch from gaining too much restating power. The American government principles learned during critical civics education lessons in our youth. McConnell wrote in his ruling, "Our founders, after enduring an 8-year war against a monarch's cruel reign from an ocean away, understood too well the importance of a more balanced approach to governance." These words served as a reminder of the historical context in which the American system of checks and balances was conceived. The founders sought to avoid the concentration of power in the hands of a single individual or branch, ensuring that power would be distributed and subject to scrutiny. The concepts of checks and balances and the separation of powers have been foundational to the American system of government. These principles were intended to protect individual liberties, promote fairness, and ensure that no branch of government could unilaterally impose its will on the people. Judge McConnell emphasized the importance of these principles in his ruling, noting that they have allowed the United States to thrive as a diverse society and to govern in a way that reflects the will of the people. Checks and balances and separation of powers are not merely abstract concepts. They are practical tools that have allowed the United States to function effectively for over 2 centuries. McConnell's ruling underscored the ongoing relevance of these principles in contemporary legal and political battles. The impact of the ruling. The injunction issued by Judge McConnell has significant implications for the Trump administration's ability to unilaterally control the allocation of federal funds. It reaffirms that the executive branch must adhere to the laws passed by Congress and cannot impose its own policy preferences without legislative approval. This ruling is a major victory for those who advocate for a strong and independent Congress and a robust system of checks and balances. The decision is also significant because it sends a clear message about the limits of executive power. It serves as a reminder that the president, no matter how powerful, is not above the law and cannot bypass the legislative process to enact policies that are inconsistent with the Constitution. The ruling strengthens the constitutional framework that has governed the United States for more than 200 years, ensuring that the government remains accountable to the people. While the Trump administration can appeal the ruling, the judge's decision is likely to have a lasting impact on future legal challenges regarding the separation of powers and the role of the executive branch in managing federal funds. The case has already sparked a broader conversation about the proper limits of executive authority and the importance of safeguarding the legislative branch's power over federal appropriations. Ongoing legal developments, in addition to the nationwide injunction, Judge McConnell ordered the Trump administration to submit a report to the court, outlining its compliance with the preliminary injunction issued earlier. This report is expected to provide further details on how the administration plans to adhere to the ruling and whether it intends to appeal the decision. The lawsuit, which was filed by a coalition of 22 state attorneys general, continues to progress through the courts. These attorneys general have argued that the freeze on FEMA funds was particularly harmful to their states, many of which were dealing with ongoing disaster recovery efforts. The legal challenges surrounding the freeze are likely to continue for some time, but the ruling issued by Judge McConnell represents a significant step toward restoring the constitutional balance of power. Conclusion: Judge John McConnell's ruling marks a decisive moment in the ongoing legal battles over the separation of powers and the limits of executive authority. By blocking the Trump administration's freeze on federal funding, McConnell reinforced the core principles that underlie the American system of government. The decision underscores the importance of maintaining a balance of power among the branches of government and ensuring that no single branch can overstep its constitutional role. As the legal challenges continue, the case will undoubtedly have lasting implications for future debates over the proper scope of executive power and the role of Congress in determining federal spending. In the meantime, the ruling stands as a testament to the resilience of the Constitution and the ongoing commitment to preserving the principles of democracy in the United States.